I'd like to call the May 10th, 2023 Town Board meeting to order. Ms. Marco, would you please call the roll?
Mr. Christou?
Present.
Mrs. Miller-Herrera?
Present.
Mr. Dotson?
Present.
Mr. Mastriani?
Present.
And Mrs. Collins?
Present.
5 present.
Thank you, Ms. Marco. A quorum is present. Please join me in reciting the Pledge of Allegiance. Ms. Miller-Herrera, will you read us?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Let's open the meeting with public hearing number 1, and it concerns the microbreweries, microwineries, microdistilleries in different zoning areas by use of special permit. Is there anyone, Ms. Marco, is there anyone who wishes to speak?
Well, I gotta go get my little board over there.
Okay. Andrea Capola looks like first.
Hi, good evening. Andrea Capola, 625 River Road, just down the street. I'd like to speak upon, I serve on the Conservation Advisory Council, and there's one thing that we really want to drive home. We're very concerned with water going in and out of these establishments, how much water they're using and how much water they're putting back into the system, which is taxed. I mean, it's not the money, it's taxed. It's almost exceeded their in and out. I hate to say the words I want to use. So at any time that you're going to add another endeavor that's going to use water in that capacity, we better make sure that it's put back nicely into our system, that we can all enjoy and have potable water to drink. So that's what the Conservation Advisory Council is destined me to say to you, to please, please, please check it out before they get to work. Okay, now, I got to speak at another level. I'm a farmer, and I live very close in proximity to Mr. Klein. He's also a farmer or an orchardist. He's been working really hard for the past 5-7 years to get his production up and running. We do not live in the areas that use municipal water. We have our own water sources and our own water disposal sources. And some of the stuff in here that I can barely read, and I tried to pick up something on the website this morning, and Town Hall, I'm sure you know because you were busy today, was closed due to lots of wire work. To my point, I come from a long line of farmers, and when we made cider, we didn't have to take the pumice, it's called pumice after you make cider, the stuff that's left over. We didn't have to take it to the dumpster. We took it out back. We have acres and acres and acres of disposal in the town chapter, whatever here, the microbreweries, microwineries and distilleries. It doesn't mention cider or it doesn't mention cider or something else you could make. It says that you have to take all the stuff, the byproducts, and properly dispose of it off property. It doesn't say like off-site, it says off the property. If I have a couple hundred acres, I have to take it off my property. I just want you to, because we don't live yeah. All right, I'm sure there's more, but it takes a lot of time to get through all this stuff. I'm going to ask also, could you please not close this public hearing until next time? Thanks.
Ms. Capola?
Yes.
Have you put these notes together and shared with the planning commission?
No.
Would that be a good idea?
Yes.
Yeah, I think that was a very good idea.
I'll come.
Well, it shouldn't go to the planning commission. At this point, it should go to the town board.
Town board,
It's
yeah.
not with the planning commission anymore, it's with the town
Oh,
board,
town
so it
board.
should come to the town board.
Oh, okay.
Well, for the record, it'd be nice to have that information because it allows us to review and amend accordingly. That's why it's so important to have a public hearing.
Yeah, and also, I gotta add something. Suppose you already have a kitchen, you know, and you've got foods that you're selling. Thanks.
Thank you.
Jeff Klein?
Hi again, everybody. I'm Jeff from I'm Hungry Chicken up the road. We have a small orchard. Andrew said nice things about us. Thank you. A couple of comments after our last meeting. Oh, first, let me address some of the issues that people have concerns about. Pomace is what happens after you press apples for apple cider. It's too much of apples. Our sheep eat our pomace. So it's properly, I think it's properly recycled. And then our sheep poop in our apple orchard. So it's yeah, it's that. So we don't have massive amounts of waste products ending up in a dumpster or if they end up in our orchard as fertilizer. In terms of water, we wash our stuff out. We wash it out before we start to make cider. We wash it out afterwards. Is it 50, 60 gallons of water? Probably. We use sanitizers so we don't waste a lot. We have a water heater in our Agamart gets approved cidery, so not a lot. We are asking that the wording be modified, as I mentioned last time, to say, and also, first of all, add a cidery, because there's no cidery on the list right now. So all my apples are feeling alone and abandoned. But we're asking that you add farm cidery, farm winery, and farm distillery. And farm brewery, sorry, because those types of businesses have to purchase all of their inputs from in-state providers. So Ken, who's here, he owns 36 lots. He's got to get all of his barley, corn, wheat, etc. from somebody who raises it in-state. Brewers have to get all their malt, their stuff from in-state, hops from in-state, everything from in-state. So it's finishing the circle. It's supporting other agricultural producers. It also gives us a slight advantage because in theory, the state prefers farm, cideries, breweries, wineries. So it's a better marketing thing. It gives us some opportunities we don't have otherwise, like we can sell other people's cider. That's a farm cider, we can't sell it. That's a micro cider. We could only wholesale our own cider. So from a business point of view, being a farm cidery, brewery, whatever, adds a lot of economic opportunities. It could let us bring in more people. It might help us hire some more. So I guess what I'm asking in summary is, can we modify it so it's micro and farm and add cideries? Thank you.
Thank you.
As a follow-up to that, because I know that was brought up in the previous public hearing, is there a definition that says somewhere, so a definition of terms that specifically states the cidery part? Where's the discount?
Yes, there is, cideries are included in the definition that currently exists. As you go in and read it, it goes into a long list. It says cideries, braggart is included, which is like a beer form of ciders. They're in there. And so it is included. Cideries are included, liquors are included, breweries are included. It's in the definition. It is there, so they are included as it currently stands.
Okay. Now, even though we're saying that, please look at that in detail again and confirm that is indeed the case from your perspective.
I did go back and make sure last time we were here that it was in there and that cideries are in there as it currently exists. notwithstanding any changes that might come from a public hearing such as today.
And then the farm part of it, and I know there's an A1 in here, is there a specific definition or anything? Does it say the word farm?
So it doesn't say the word farm breweries, but when you go to the ABC laws and look at their definitions for what's a microbrewery, what's a farm brewery, they have the same gallon limit. So for a license for that. So the microbrewery and the farm breweries have a 75,000 gallon limit for what you can be to classify that in as much as you produce to fall under that. So when we were looking at it, and I think, and we do mention it, if you look at the meeting minutes from the Planning and Zoning Commission, we talked about the definitions and how we were going to word them and whether farms were going to be in or out or whether it was just going to be microbreweries. But when we use that 75,000 gallon limit, knowing that it applies to both a microbrewery and to a farm brewery, it was supposed to be open so that it was inclusive, that it could be either or, would fit the same definition. But this is what a public hearing is for. And if the public would like a more firm definition on the distinguishment between the two, that's what the public's here to speak about. So.
Ken Gibbons? Oh, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, adding farm would give us a lot of other opportunities for how we make it and how we sell it.
Grants.
That are not under micro.
Right, so I don't want to, that's the important part of this public hearing again, is I just don't want to miss the farm. When this originally came in front of the board, it was, I think it was thought to be just ag, and then of course I know it was modified for the zoning. What we don't want to miss is the opportunity that was going to be presented for the ag industry here and our ag property owners, so that you do have the opportunity to take advantage of this. And we're trying to make sure there's no caveats in there that somehow, oh geez, this was never, well, it's not for farms now, because we certainly don't want to lose that.
Well, farm, to fill it in, is a state alcoholic beverage type of license. So micro is a type of license, farm is a type of license, and none of those is a third type of license. And each one of those levels of license allows certain benefits. So farm has more benefits than micro. I'm not suggesting and hoping, because you could have somebody do a billion gallons. We got Anheuser pushing you, which we don't want. Right.
Ken Gibbons?
Hi, good evening. Ken Gibbons. I own Schenectady Distilling Company, which is right across the way. We're a farm distillery. I also serve on the Schenectady County Farm Bureau as a board member, the New York State Farm Bureau as a beverage board member, and the New York State Distillers Guild as a board member. So, and I teach at Schenectady Community College craft distilling here at the college. So, this type of legislation is near and dear to my heart. We've been legislating in New York State to try to fix a whole bunch of stuff just because they forgot about the distilling industry when they enacted some laws. We just were successful in getting the tax credit fixed for New York State farm distilleries, so that we're now getting the same tax credit that the other micro organizations are. The issue, just in quick note, I can see there's a little problem with terminology, which tends to keep haunting this industry. A lot of these industries don't have a title as micro. It doesn't exist under the New York State liquor laws and the liquor licenses. So I did print out a list of the available New York State liquor licenses and just some basic, very basic information about what they're allowed to do in each of those license classes. Breweries have a farm brewery license and a microbrewery license, as was discussed. They're about the same whether they use New York State products or not. Cider producers, there's only a cider producer or a farm cidery. There's no micro cidery. It doesn't exist under New York State law. Distillers, of course, you can have, there's no micro distillery license. There's a Class A1 license, which is very similar to a micro, but it's not labeled as a micro under the New York State law. And then there's a farm license, which is ours, the one that we use, which is 75,000 gallons a year production from New York State products. wineries have either just a winery license or a farm winery license. So there's no micro license when it comes to wineries. So that's not really a number. That's not really something that they use. Oh, I lied. They do have one. It's for home consumption of like 1,500 gallons a year, but it's really tiny. It's not really, you know, it has to be located on a farm specifically, you know. And then the last product now is mead, which we don't want to forget about our mead producers now. But yeah, mead producers are kind of the same thing. They don't have a micro. They either have a full-blown meadery or you have a farm meadery. So those are the only terminologies that are there. I have this information if the board is interested in taking it, so they have it for them. So they don't have to look for it. But yeah, it's just important to get whatever legislation that's happening. You know, these definitions are with the New York State Liquor Authority, and if you stick with those definitions, then you know what you've got matches, and you know what you're going to have in your community when you're all done.
Thank you.
Ken, did you get a chance to look through this legislation? Did you read this?
I have not seen the whole law yet. I haven't read the whole thing.
Would that be something you'd be interested in doing?
Yeah, sure.
And there's other comments that you had in there?
Is there just one?
There's
Yeah,
other
Yeah, just
comments?
All right, I'll take copies and send it to all of you.
Yeah.
That would be appreciated.
Yeah, yeah.
Really, your expertise would be of very big value to the legislation
Yep.
before we submit it for a vote.
Absolutely. I'd be happy
And if
to.
you have legislations from other municipalities that kind of are clean, share with us.
Yeah, I know when I was getting my application through the town of Glenville, I was working with a firehouse, so the building had no zoning at all whatsoever in that building. So it had to be completely rezoned, and when it did, it fell under a category that didn't have distilleries. It said breweries, wineries, etc., not distilleries. So they had to quickly, they did for me, they quickly moved it and changed that rule so that distilleries was included. And only because it was an oversight originally. And that's one of the things that happens. These licenses are so new, it's just been an oversight issue, not really an issue of not wanting those particular businesses.
Has the liquor authority been receptive to updating what they need to do on their end? Have you found? Or as far as licensing categories and things like that, or it is what it is, and we gotta fit the square peg into the round hole of the licensing
they're
category.
continuing to work with it a little bit and fix it. Like over time, like originally we could sell our own product, then we could sell other people's products, then we could sell, and then someone said, well, what about food? And there's like, oops, we forgot about food, so now we got to put food in. And then now, oh, you want to sell T-shirts? Oops, forgot about that too. So now we're going to allow you to sell T-shirts. So this has been going on for years of trying to fix this to allow us to be sustainable. Like my business, you know, I live on farmers markets. I have a small tasting room. You know, I distill for other breweries, cideries, you know, other distilleries. I teach classes over there to make money. I teach, you know, so we do a wide range of activities to try to make a living.
So owning your own business gives you the privilege of choosing the 80 hours a week you're going to work.
Sure. That's one of the jobs I have. Right, exactly.
So, the legislation that you're under in Glenville covers all of these things as well as with the liquor authority?
It did, yeah. Yeah, it did. So I'll find that for you too.
Thank you.
Get that over to you.
Ken, if you could address Mr. Klein's request in that the law that we pass have the distinction of being farm operations as opposed to microbrew operations. And for everybody, the difference is that a farm cidery or a farm brewery is just a classification, a permit that the state would grant for any operation that gets its input products from within New York State, correct? Just New York State as it's
Yes,
strong.
correct.
Mr. Klein requests that we adopt a law that is more stringent, allowing breweries and cideries and distilleries to come into our town, having to get their ingredients from within New York. What would be the? Could you?
I'm not suggesting that. I'm fine with allowing micros.
Yes.
It could be micros and farm.
Okay.
No problem.
He just wants to make sure you don't get cut
I
out.
just want to make sure farm
My
is in.
understanding is
Right.
that the way it's written.
That's what I understood it as well, is that
Yes,
you
but
want-
he's just saying he wants it more firmly, explicitly laid out in there, instead of it covering both by the gallon limit.
Okay.
He wants it just more explicitly stated, this one's farm, this one's
Yeah, because,
micro.
for instance, if you just went with the flat gallon limit, then potentially you could allow any license class come in as long as they only produced a certain amount. And now the town would have an obligation to somehow figure out how much they're producing to see if they're in their limits that the town wanted them to be in. And I think that's really difficult. I don't know how you would do that. I think that creates a real problem. I think you want to decide what license classes you want to allow based on what their production limits are in those license classes, and then be done. So you're not trying to re-legislate how much production these businesses have. New York State already did that.
Well, I thank you for clarifying. I misunderstood and thought that you were trying to drive more New York State grain or New York State apples to be used.
Well, I am, but if somebody wants to open a micro and source apples from Washington State, knock yourself out.
We have plenty of apples here.
We have lots of apples.
I was going to ask you to speak about the other things that you distill, whether your supply chains exist within New York State or if, you know.
They do. My supply chain, so most of the grain that I use comes locally. So I get grain from Arnold's up on the top of the hill, right across the river. That's my corn source. I get wheat and rye from a farmer out in Canajoharie. And then I get my malted barley from a malt house in Albany, but they normally source their malt from Skodak, I believe. So those are my...
So very local.
Oh, it has, yeah, it's very local. It doesn't pay to ship grain any distance. So these organizations, whichever they may be, will be trying to source grain from as close as possible because, you know, corn is, you know, I pay $10 a bag for 50 pounds of corn. So it's 20 cents a pound. So you can't afford to ship that. It'll be double.
It'll be more than what the corn itself
Yeah,
is.
it'll be more than the cost of the corn. So you don't want to do that. So everything's going to come as locally as possible. The only thing that prevents me from getting rye and wheat closer is I don't mill at my facility. So I end up having, so I don't mill the grain. So I need somebody else to do it. So, and that's why I go to farms that can do it for me. So that's why I go out to Canajoharie, because they can mill it for me right there. So I get it all done, ready to go.
Does that make you a farm distillery?
The only thing that makes me a farm distillery is that I use, well, my license class, of course, but that requires me to use 75% or more New York State product. But we're able to use 100%, so it's not a problem. Malted barley is the only item that, to some degree, they thought was going to be harder to source. And it would be if we didn't have a malt house in Albany. There are some places that don't have malt houses close by. You know what I mean? We're lucky we have, you know, the guy drops it off on his way home from GE. And he works at GE. You know what I mean? All these businesses, nobody's working one job. You know what I mean? They all have 4 jobs, you know, to do this. It's the way farmers are.
Farm cideries have to source everything they can. We have lots of apples. So that's not a problem.
Thank you.
Sure, absolutely.
Mike Nally?
Oh,
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yes, I'm Mike Nally, and I'm the president of Schenectady County Farm Bureau, and I came primarily in support of Jeff and what he's trying to get up and running. But I did want to be sure that the board realizes that, and I think you've already heard that, how busy these craft beverage people are and how they start pulling in different other operations and businesses. And it is very motivational and good for farms to know that that people are starting to use their product again right here locally to make stuff. I think the newest craft beverages around are using the farm operations to assist them with their businesses getting started because of the perk that New York State has offered through the farm craft beverage programs. So both Ken is how many years? I don't even know,
5 years.
5 years. Murray's Fools also on the other side, they are a farm distillery. And I don't think they're a year old yet. go down to the Great Flats Brewery on Lafayette Street in Schenectady. So they're actually a farm brewery. Now, they have some different types of brews, but they're also able to get whatever the percentage of New York State owned versus outside New York State. They can go as far outside of New York State as they want, including Europe and anywhere, to bring in stuff and make these different beverages. So thank you, town, for considering that and listening to the comments. And don't miss out. But I think the farm craft beverage is the place that you want to be sure you're zeroing in on.
We just want to make sure it gets done properly, so everyone is included.
Right,
And
yeah.
maximize our
You
opportunities.
hate to have to redo.
We want to maximize our opportunities. Before we let them get into this, let's them get into it all the way. Thank you.
Thank you.
There's nobody else that signed in for public hearing 1 unless they just didn't sign in.
Is there anybody in the audience that wants to speak about public hearing number 1 but hasn't signed it? Is there anybody on Zoom, Chuck, that has said anything about public hearing number 1?
No one's asking. Okay, with that, I guess I'd like to make a motion to keep the public hearing open.
Second the motion.
Motion by Mr. Dodson, second by Mr. Christou. Ms. Marco, will you call the roll?
To keep the public hearing open, Mr. Christou?
Yes.
Mrs. Miller Herrera?
Yes.
Mr. Dodson?
Yes.
Mr. Mastriani?
Yes.
And Mrs. Collins?
Yes.
5 yes.
Okay, motion passed. We'll now open public hearing number 2. We received a comment on proposed introductory local law 2022 to amend chapter 267 water of the town code of the town of Rotterdam. Ms. Marco, is there anybody who wishes to speak?
They did not sign up.
Is there anybody in the audience that wishes to speak about the new, it's our town code for water, it includes watering and other aspects?
Is this for 5 or 3?
It would be for the whole.
All of it?
Yes.
So districts 3 and 4, which are the.
My question is that it used to be when you got a water permit to put the water into your building, it cost $250, and then this is the heads. It says whatever it cost.
So I think.
If you got a new house, you need to know what the permit cost is,
Yes.
and that usually that entails the tap to the shut up,
Yep.
and there was a fee.
And so, yeah, let's have that conversation because we can have that. So my understanding again, you got a water main in the town of Rotterdam in either District 3 or 4, which is the junction, or Water District number 5. The town or contractor is tapping the water main, bringing a service to a curb box, okay, that's near the property line, that's actually owned by the property owner, the curb box, the shut off, okay?
So the curb box is going to be now owned by the property owner?
And much to my understanding, again.
Okay, it used
town
to
of
be
Rotterdam-
belonged to the town.
Yeah, no, they did. So that and what I've been so I'm used to, because I work in many different municipalities, is always used to that curb box being owned by the municipality. Unique in the town of Rotterdam is that curb box is actually owned by the property owner. Okay.
So if it's owned by the property owner, they can turn it on and off whenever they
And they
like.
have the rights to do that as well as in here it says that the town of Rotterdam has the rights to actually turn on and off that curb box as well. So Molly, you can correct me if I'm wrong, we have had meetings recently with property owners where we discussed what that is, and it was my understanding there was a fee associated with that, okay? There's actually multiple fees associated with that. So Larry's here, I know that
But
we
if you
have.
go across the street, it costs more, but if it's the water main's on the same side as the house, it used to be $250. I don't know. I've been out of the business for 20 years now, so.
Now, if there's not a fee defined, it's because of inflation right now. And that's part of the reason why maybe there's not one in there, because we could say previously it's going to cost X. Recently, everything that was X is now 1.4 or 40-50% higher. But that is something that I guess we could go back and take a look at. I know in our schedule fees we got, does it say anything? Yeah. 1 inch tap, seems like. So I am reading in here, Molly is kind enough to get it out. So water department installed 1 inch tap, same side of the street was $1,100 plus $4 a foot.
Okay.
And then the 1 inch tap, the opposite side of the street was $1,500 plus $4 a foot. Okay, so there is contractor certified installation greater than 1 inch was $1,650.
That's gonna be the set fees?
That's what's in our fees right now.
Okay,
Yep.
but the way this is written, it says whatever it costs.
Yeah, what it should say at the end, and we'll look at that because we're gonna hold this one
Because
open.
you could send out 3 people, or you could send out 6 people, and be totally different prices.
No, we have, this reference, the 267 does reference our schedule of fees, and that should be what governs. And of course, we were trying to change that in here so that the schedule of fees can be modified on the yearly basis, and we didn't have a fee specifically in here, 267, that you could come to the schedule of fees, because that could change. And then we wouldn't have to worry about the fee being incorrect in the 267 list.
Well, they usually, every 3 years, they upgraded the cost of the...
Yes, and we would do that here too.
Okay, because like say I wanted to build a new house, how am I gonna know what the cost is?
Yeah, you are correct.
I know what it is from the shut-off end, but...
Like Mr. Dodson said, this isn't necessarily amending the schedule of fees, which is the town's
Okay.
set of fees. This is just
I
amending
just
the
got done reading
chapter.
what, and I didn't see any set fees in here, that's why I'm asking.
And it should refer to the schedule of fees now, which is what Molly's brought to.
What it says in here, whatever it costs, the town will be charged.
And in our schedule of fees, okay.
And I think, and your concern was, are they gonna send 2 men out, or are they gonna do 6, and of course.
I'll hold you to it. I'll ready to put one in.
I'm making a note.
Mr. Dodson, based on your experience with this municipality, is it prudent to keep it, the junction box ownership the way it is? Or do we look into doing what you witnessed in other municipalities?
I'm going to say, Evan, that recently I've had that conversation in detail with many members of the, working for the town, and that's a conversation I guess I would hold off at this point in time, but that is a conversation. There's impacts to that.
Well, that's what I'm saying, is it prudent, you know?
Not at this time.
Okay.
I have one more question. And when you disconnect the water service, you demolish a house. Right now it's set up, it's up to the owner of the demolished house to dig to the main to turn off the curb back on the water main. Just got done doing that 2 years ago.
Okay.
And we were required to dig to the road.
So, thank you. So normally, again, unless it's so when you say you did that, did you have a contractor do that?
Yeah.
So when you're digging the road, you potentially you're in a state highway, that's a whole
You
other
know, you gotta get curb cuts and the whole bit.
Yes.
All the permits. But see, in here, you got, it says Rotterdam, is the only one that can touch to the main.
Yes, sir. So yes and no. You know, I think this is written, you know, obviously we don't want a property owner, okay, to be excavating in our highways, state highway, county. There's a permit process for all that. But we do have conditions in there that allow contractors with proper insurance and all that to come in and do that work and terminate it at the curb, I'll say the corporation that's actually at the main. Yes.
Okay.
Well, I'm glad you brought it up because it allows us to get back in here and clarify, just to make sure that that's clear.
Because that went into part of that, the new people would complain about the water bill, and we had a demolished house, and then we had to prove that we dug to the street, and
Yes, and I know this does say in here that, you know, you apply for that. However, the town, again, is not going to, will stop charging you when that's all been confirmed. Okay, so I know there's some language in here, so we'll just look at it, make sure it's clear.
because they won't stop charging you if you still got curb cut.
You got it. Yes. Okay.
Is there anyone else who wants to speak on public hearing number 2 about the water regulations or water code for Rotterdam?
Madam Supervisor, I make a motion to keep this public hearing open as well.
And I would second that.
Okay, motion to keep this public hearing open by Mr. Christou, seconded by Mr. Dodson. Clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Christou to keep the public hearing open?
Yes.
Mrs. Miller Herrera?
Yes.
Mr. Dodson?
Yes.
Mr. Mastriani?
Yes.
And Mrs. Collins?
Yes.
5 yes to keep open.
Motion passes. And now we're going to take time from Mr. Doug Cole from Prime A&E. It's going to give us a summary of the water districts number 3 and 4, the system evaluation and leak detection. Thank you, Mr. Cole.
Thank you, Supervisor. The town of Rotterdam hired Prime A&E Group back in March of this year to perform a comprehensive water system evaluation and leak detection study. And we've been making very good progress in the last couple of months. This is, again, I said, a comprehensive study, so there are a lot of moving parts to it. It includes valve and hydrant inventory, which we've had people out there over the past couple of weeks with GPS equipment going and taking shots on all the valves, all the hydrants. And we worked in conjunction with the water department when they were out there flushing so that they could operate the hydrants and we could see which ones work and which ones don't work. And same thing with the valves. They were operating valves for us so that we could determine what works and doesn't work. And I'll get into some more of the stats on what we found. But there's other parts of the study that include creation of an overall water district map for water districts 3 and 4. So it'll be probably the first time that all of the pipes and valves and hydrants and the district boundaries have been shown on a single map. This map eventually will be provided to the county. It can be on the SIMS, the Internet Mapping System, and it can be available to the town workers on an iPhone so that they can locate things right in the field. We're also going to be helping with the lead service line inventory, which is required to be done by EPA. They have a deadline for the inventory being submitted in October of 2024. And another aspect, we're putting together a leak detection contract whereby the town would go out to bid and accept a contractor that uses acoustical equipment to listen for leaks, and they can pinpoint where those leaks are. Then we'll go out there and we'll get GPS locations of those leaks, and we'll develop some different kind of scenarios on how to repair those leaks. Some other things that are going to be in the study, basically we're going to produce an engineering report that includes all of this information that can be submitted for funding. So we're also going to be looking at a redundant source. Right now you have 2 wells right here off Main Street, but we're going to look at, is there another place in the Great Flats Aquifer that we could develop a redundant well system? Or would it make sense to extend the pipe and connect into the District 5 wells over on Rice Road? And then the last part of the study is going to be looking at a high-level look at the pros and cons of consolidation of Water Districts 3 and 4 with Water District 5. So does it make sense to do that? I think we were out here last year, and on the surface it might have sounded good, but we'll put the real figures together to show you is it good or not. So the valve and hydrant inventory. So hydrants, we have them broken down by Water District 3 and 4. So Water District 3, the larger district, has 70 hydrants that we have a location on. The age range is from 1947, when the system was originally installed, all the way up to 2020, probably when one of the hydrants was replaced. So 10 of those hydrants are still from 1947. There are more than 20 that are 50 years old. And the vast majority of those 20 are made by a company called Ludlow that has been out of business since 1969. So, as you can imagine, you can't get parts for those anymore. So, we're probably going to be recommending to replace all 23 of those, and then we'll look at are there any others that would need some replacement. Water District 4 has 13 hydrants. And those are much newer. They were put in 2001 and 2002, and they're all in pretty good shape, so we're not going to recommend to replace any of those. They're only just over 20 years old. So in both districts, you have a total of 83 hydrants. Each hydrant typically has a valve on what we call the hydrant lead, which is a 6-inch pipe that comes off of the main that travels parallel with the road. So we broke out those valves separately from line valves, which are used to shut off the mains in the roads or sections of streets. So the hydrant valves, there's 62 of those in Water District 3, so we didn't quite find one for every hydrant. Of those 62, there are 12 that didn't work for one reason or another. And then we also found 10 that were not accessible. And there's several reasons for that. Some of them have been paved over, and they'll have to be saw cut out so that we can operate them, but we know the location. Sometimes the valve box is out of alignment. So there's a cast iron box that goes down vertically 5 feet to the top of the valve so that you can put the key on it and turn it to open and close it. Sometimes frost heave can move those, or plows can hit them and take them out of alignment, and then you can't get the key down onto the nut. So there's some that should be adjusted. And the town did a good job. They were going through ahead of us getting the dirt out of the valve boxes so that they could get the key on there to operate while we observed. So the last category was those line valves that are on the mains. In Water District 3, there are 64 valves, and we found 24 that did not work, and only one that was not accessible. There were 5 other valves that were determined to be critical, and everybody was a little scared to close it in case it wouldn't open, so we didn't touch them. So they would kind of be a high priority. If they're that important, they would be on our list for replacement. Water District 4, only 4 line valves. 1 didn't work, and 1 was inaccessible. So the total valves in the whole system, both districts, was 143, with 44 that were non-functional and 12 that were inaccessible. So still a little bit more field work to do. We'll firm up this list and include those recommendations on replacements or repairs in the report. Another thing I mentioned was the lead service line inventory. We have developed a draft questionnaire that we've started reviewing with some of the town representatives. We're hoping to do the survey as much electronically as possible. It's going to be the best way to gather the data. We are going to still, of course, we know everybody doesn't have internet access, so we will have paper copies, but we're going to try to have as much of this electronic as possible. And we're going to ask people to basically do a self-test on the service line as it comes into your house. We're going to have a little diagram that shows how your service line either comes through the wall or the floor of the basement, comes up to your, has a shutoff, has your meter. So before the shutoff and the wall or the concrete floor, we're going to ask you to do a little scratch test, and you'll be able to see if it's copper, like a penny, if it's shiny silver and a magnet sticks to it, then it's a galvanized pipe. If it's softer metal and still shiny and a magnet doesn't stick, then it's a lead service. So we're going to ask you to collect that kind of information for us.
Is there a particular year that if the house was built after, you know it's copper?
Copper is the easiest one to recognize. It's really the galvanized and the lead that are.
Would you find that only in older houses, or could you possibly find lead pipes in a newer? My house was built in '94, for example.
So you definitely would not have lead.
Correct.
Yes.
That's what I'm saying. Is there a particular year that, you know, if your house was built before 1964, please look closely, a little more closely, or something like that?
Yeah, definitely. You know, lead was being phased out in the late 50s and 60s, but galvanized continued through the 70s and 80s. 1987 is really when EPA outlawed the use of lead in solder. So you still could have copper pipes with lead solder, but that's not what they're looking for. We're looking for the pipe material that's lead.
And Doug, in Water District number 4, which is the newer one, we'd have an expectation there that most likely copper.
True, yes. Yeah, but it's only
and the water commissioner back in the early days, copper was required in this town.
Great. So then, you know, this may...
Because, you know, or Bucky Wells was the water commissioner till 1982.
Good.
That's great.
That's great.
That's good information. Yeah.
Well, I did repairs. We did all our own repairs in town.
From Bucky Moles was the water commissioner from when to when?
Gotta be 60s. And before that, in fact, my father-in-law, or her grandfather, drew the plans for the water system. And we gave them to Mike Grasso in 1982. The original plans.
But they've always required copper in the town of Rotterdam, as long as you can remember.
This town also required copper at all times. When you had to go through the water commissioner and get a hookup.
Great.
Doug, you were talking about this being electronic yet, and that the public's going to participate in this through the town website. How's that going to happen?
Yes. I'm thinking that we may have to have a mailing, or certainly have it on the town website, how to click a link to get into the survey. But we also have, the potential to mail it to people and have a QR code that you can use, or request a paper copy.
And the paper copy would then be transferred into an electronic format once it's received?
Yes, we would be able to, we'd have to assemble all that data to crunch the numbers and fill out the EPA forms. So it's much more cost effective to do it electronically. And then the last part I had mentioned was the leak detection program. So we're currently putting together a project manual that contains the plans and specifications for that leak study that the town can put out to bid. So we're looking to have the project manual to the town on May 24th for review. If everything goes well, we have a couple of weeks here to make any modifications to the town request. And we're anticipating that the town board can call for bids at their June 14th meeting. That would allow us to open bids on July 10th. And then the town would award the contract at the August meeting. And the work would actually take place in the months of September and October. And actually that's a good time after all the summer high water usage is decreasing, because they can hear the leaks better when there's less flow in the pipes. And we're talking to some of the different companies that will probably bid on this. When they come in, they work nonstop until they're done. So we're looking at, we gave them a 2-month window, but they'll probably be done in less than 4 weeks.
But when you say a project manual, so it's like a scope of work manual?
Just like any construction project, it's still the big thick manual that describes the scope of work, the methods that we anticipate they would use, acceptable methods that we know produce the right results.
Is there any particular areas within the town that have been flagged as a priority to look for leaks, or it's just they're going to do the whole thing?
Evan, just to answer that question, we just recently provided Doug a map. So our water department took a map that they provided us, and they located on there where they repaired leaks in the past. Sometimes, just upstream or downstream, there could be other leaks there. So we did try to provide some of that in-house information to them that we can share with those leak detection firms.
Certainly, yeah.
Just one other question. So work generally during the day?
I believe they are going to work mainly during the day, yeah. And that's about all I had for tonight.
Doug, thanks for this.
Yes, Doug, thank you. Good information.
I just like to thank you, because I think this is very important, not only for our workers, but for the fire department.
Yes.
Once we have a clear marked GPS for all the hydrants, all the valves, the hydrants are in good condition, then I think it's going to make it much safer for the fire department, and definitely for our workers, if it, like you said, you'd be able to pull it up on any phone.
Yeah.
So thank you, I really appreciate it.
And I'm sure our conservation committee likes the idea of protecting and fixing those leaks as well. So it sounds like a win-win-win.
I like fire protection, especially.
Thank you.
All right, so now we'll move on to Privilege of the floor. Ms. Marco, is there anyone who wishes to speak? I'll remind everybody that when you get to about 3.5 minutes, I'll be raising my hand. But is there anyone who wishes to speak at privilege of the floor?
Mark Diffenbach?
Hi, everyone. I'm going to pass this to the board just so that you can see it. Thank you for letting me speak. My name is Mark Diefenbach. I live at 1331 Main Street on the corner of Turnbull Lane, and my request is about Turnbull Lane. Turnbull Lane is paved for about 100, 200 feet, and then it's a dirt road that goes back to the canal bike path and to the CSX rail tracks. My wife and I and a lot of people who live in the junction between Ligerio Lane and Iroquois Street would use Turnbull Lane to take advantage of the bike trail. There are cyclists that we see go back there, families, parents with strollers, people walking their dogs, all that sort of thing, going back and using Turnbull Lane. Trucks and taxis also use Turnbull Lane to get CSX workers back to the tracks. The issue is not that it's a dirt road. That's not a problem at all. It's that over the 30 years, at least that I've been here, the potholes have gotten wider and deeper to the point that they cover the whole road. And those puddles, those really big puddles, actually don't even dry up, if it doesn't rain for a couple of weeks. They're really deep, so they hang around. There's probably clay in the road as well, so that kind of helps with that. So anyone who's walking back there or biking back there has to either walk through the deep puddles, or they have to try to walk on the side of the road, which is muddy, and on one side there's a drop-off, so it's a little sketchy. Whenever I walk back there or take my bike, I'm afraid of either slipping or falling or twisting my ankle on the rocks, and that kind of pop up from the mud. So my request is really just that the potholes be filled with gravel or crusher run just to the point so that the lane is level and has a chance to dry out. I think that would help everyone who uses that. I also did quickly, I know that Electric City Taxi takes a lot of people back to CSX with the workers there, and they would be thrilled if it got done as well. It gets really sketchy, especially in the winter. So that's all.
Larry, do you have any information on this road relative to our ownership?
Yes, we do own that right away. It used to go up to a water tower years ago up there.
Okay.
But since that's been, I don't know how many years back, depleted, it's only like 100 or 200 feet that there's one driveway there that feeds one house.
So, but it's a road that's used for cycling.
CSX owns it.
Well, or uses it, right?
Yeah, my understanding.
That isn't the road to the water tower. That the one for the water tower went up by Rotterdam Septic.
Yes, and that's how I got into the water source tank.
Right. Yeah, but
or Lugerio Lane, whichever way you
an
went.
old water tower there, Larry? Is that
that was CSX.
So it's a 100-foot road, you said? It's a 50-foot road?
No, it's like...
It's 150 is paved. Right. I would say it's about a quarter mile.
Yeah,
quarter mile.
Is it worth running a crushed stone over the thing and even it out?
Okay, I got it. It's I'm sorry.
My colleague here pulled up a photo from 15 years ago, and you can see one little pothole has become this big pothole now.
Yeah, it's just over years, it's just dirt, so it kind of keeps pushing down,
And from Larry's defense, again, if it's in the beginning of it's paved, you got one house, there wouldn't be a lot of an investment into it, for our purposes, because it's not a property owner at the end. However, it's being used by other entities, including the public, for access to the bike trail, correct?
I'm not really aware of all that, how much is being used, to tell you the truth.
I mean, I can see it only because I live right on the corner, so I can sit in my backyard and I see.
Because like in the wintertime, we just plow that for that first driveway and that's it.
I can say that the public uses that road quite often to get to the bike path. Anyone that lives on Main Street, from a few houses in after Ligerio Lane, all the way up until where you're at the gas station, all of the kids that take the bike path, including my two, use Turnbull Lane to get onto it.
So it's worth looking at.
Yeah, totally, yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks for bringing it to our attention.
Okay, thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Kimberly Scannell?
Kimberly Scannell. I live at 257 Crawford Road. I'm here tonight just to talk a little bit about an email that I sent to all the board members and all the planning commission members, and also so that a lot of people in the general public could hear about this. As you know, and some of you may know, there's a 5 megawatt battery storage facility that's currently slated to go in our town. It's in front of the Planning Commission right now. It's not covered by the solar moratorium because it's a standalone battery energy storage system. I attended the most recent Planning Commission meeting. They did a great job asking questions. The town designated engineer has done a great job. Blue Wave did a great job. One of their representatives, I see her here tonight. Hi. You did a great job. She was very open to answering questions. But my biggest concern is that we don't have any battery energy storage system code in our town. And in absence of that, Collier's Engineering and Design's opinion is that it would fall under public utility, which I understand from a legal perspective is adequate. But I think we can do better than adequate. I think we should be looking for absolute best practice when it comes to things like battery energy storage systems. So since we don't have that kind of code right now, I would like you as a town board to possibly hold a public meeting, possibly have some kind of a resolution that until we have good, solid battery energy storage system code, that we use the New York State model guidance for BESS. I know that Blue Wave is telling the Planning Commission that that's kind of what they're basing everything that they're doing on. And because that project has already been initiated, they've jumped through a lot of hoops so far. Maybe if the town could resolve to use New York State model guidance and you could get the developer to agree to stick to that model guidance, it might be a temporary solution for anything that's already in the queue to go into our town. I do think that it would be appropriate to have a battery energy storage system moratorium put in place after this, though, if we're not developing adequate code. I think the New York State model guidance would be a really good Band-Aid for now. And so that brings me to the next thing that I think I should bring up. When it comes to solar, when it comes to battery energy storage systems, we've been very reactive in this town. So I would like to take an opportunity to get us to be proactive about the next thing that I promise is coming, and that's wind energy. Our code for wind energy facilities was developed and adopted in 2008. I think we can agree that there's been a whole lot of changes since 2008. So I would like to propose a moratorium of wind energy projects in this town until we are in a position, either with our Energy Advisory Committee or another committee that you would designate, to develop adequate wind energy code that aligns with our comprehensive plan and also with our other renewable energy codes. Because battery energy storage systems aren't supposed to be standalone. That's not the plan. The plan is to have the solar farm filling up the batteries or the wind farm filling up the batteries. So we need to have our codes that are aligning not only with our comprehensive plan, but with the other codes. So that's all.
Thank you so much.
Fun fact that I learned at the Planning Commission meeting, there are only 10 battery energy storage systems statewide. So when we're thinking, wow, this is a no-brainer. They're all over the place. They're not all over the place. There's only 10 of them. Thank you.
Brenda Terosian.
Where's close to also?
This one's near Stewart's in Rotterdam. It's on Verdeck Street, right next to the natural gas facility.
Good evening. This is probably
either week 9 or week 10. So I'll bring it up again. And you guys know what I'm going to bring up. And you'll be happy that I'll probably stop talking before my 4 minutes. I can't use my voice call. Again, I've been asking for the name of the lawyer. Okay, now I'm going to be asking the name of the law firm that represented the town of Rotterdam with the negotiations with the attorneys representing Viaport. Again, what was Rotterdam's counteroffer? I know I'm not going to get an answer, which I don't understand. It has nothing to do with the Robert Rules of Order. Because I checked it, I read it, and there's nothing in there saying that if somebody asks you guys a question, that you can't respond. So, next, Mr. Mastroni, I want to thank you for clearing up the formula to get the $250,000 back. Not $1 million, $250,000. I'm somewhat confused about why we gave them, going by your explanation, 7.5 months of rent that we had to give them. The space, the town never moved in that space, in that Kerry Kmart space. Renovations were never done, it was never done for Rotterdam to move there. How can the town pay 7.5 months worth of rent? Mr. Mastriani, you said it was for rent, when it was not ready for occupancy. And what was the date that Rotterdam was supposed to be moving into the old Kmart? And I know I'm not going to get any answers, but I'll be here every single time, because I don't understand why you can't. You ask questions tonight, you answer questions for some reason, something about this you can't answer. I don't know why. Again, and I have to correct Mr. Mastriani. We didn't get $750,000 back. That $1 million that was given to the airport was not Rotterdam's, they weren't supposed to do that. That's ARPA money given to communities that were affected by COVID and used for things that got way later or couldn't get done because of COVID. Not to move the town, not to move the police station. It was $1 million of ARPA money. It wasn't our money. The $250,000 that we gave, or excuse me, you guys gave to Viaport was our money, was taxpayers' money that we gave to them for rent, and we're not even in there. I mean, that's a sweet deal. I mean, it's a sweet deal. And you know, I don't know, something just doesn't add up. And I'm sorry, Mr. Cousteau, I know I'm going to get a little nauseous again tonight, and I forgot to bring you Pepto-Bismol. I'm sorry. I want answers. I go to Walmart, and people are yelling at me for answers. Mr. Dobson, I want to thank you for sort of selling the water project idea for District 5. Again, something is amiss. You cannot or will not tell the residents of Water District 5 the approximate, with this $3-4 million project, approximately what would our water bill, you call it a bill, I call it a tax, would be with this project. How many people here are from the junction? How many of you were very happy when you got your water bill last year? From 75 to, you were happy?
Mine lowered.
Mine went from $50 to $1,200.
Okay. Mine went from $1,200
no, okay.
to $600.
This is what I'm saying.
$2,500 to $600. I was happy.
You happy?
Yeah.
Were you happy with the $1,400?
$1,200 now.
$1,200? Okay, at the last meeting,
Yeah, I live right here on Main Street.
at the last
It's
meeting,
1354 Main Street.
Mr. Mastriani, you told the residents of Rotterdam that the water bill or tax is minuscule. Told it to that lady right there that her $1,400 or $1,200 is minuscule. But I will thank you though, Mr. Mastriani. At least you used my name. Unlike another town board member who couldn't use my name. And I wish you would, because you know what? I'm kind of proud of my name. And the people you refer to that comes here every 2 weeks, the people. When I went to school, people meant more than one. And there's only one person, one, that talks about Viaport, that talks about the money that was given to Viaport, taxpayers' money. And you also said, and I didn't, for some reason, 2 weeks ago reading, I was trying to look it up, I wanted to make sure I got everything you said right. For some reason, it would not show up. But you mentioned about,
Ms. Trojan, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but you're over at 5.5, 6 minutes, sorry.
I know.
Colleen Julia, I'm sorry.
It's a segment.
Oh, cool, thank you.
Thanks. I was formally introduced, thank you, Ms. Scannell. I am the representative from Ely, and we have the battery energy storage project in front of the planning board right now. And I do want to thank the Energy Committee. I know typically these positions are volunteer, so thank you for putting your time into your community. Just here tonight to convey that we've been cooperative in our application. We have, tried to work as best as we can, working and responding to the town designated engineer, who I do understand has expertise and experience in battery energy storage. We are aware and have been using the NYSERDA model law as guidance, and we would agree to continue to do so in the absence of anything additional. We intend to continue to be cooperative. We've had a meeting with the fire department and are clearly open to additional meetings and input as this is newer technology and we want to educate as much as possible. I would offer at any point in time to be a resource to connect you to any of the resources that I'm aware of that would help other municipalities. We are part of the New York BEST organization. We have a lot of contacts in with NYSERDA. So really, I'd love to be that kind of partnership. I understand this is usually not the place that it comes from, but if there's anything that I have, I would gladly share. So that was it. I was just coming to ask that out of respect of the time that the planning board's put into the application so far, the engineer, the town planner, and everybody who's put that effort forth, that if we could possibly continue forward, we would just really love that opportunity.
Question. Ms. Scannell mentioned something about freestanding versus a battery supply that's supplied by solar or wind. Could you expand and educate us a little bit about what the difference is, why a freestanding battery storage, and how is that powered versus being fed by wind and solar?
Yes, absolutely. I will give it a try. So right now, there are multiple sources that feed our grid. There are natural gas plants, there are solar farms, there are wind, there's lots of them and lots of potential sources for energy in the grid. In the renewable space, as we look to shut down some of the fossil fuels that are, the peakers that, when people come home at 5, 6 o'clock at night, throw on their air conditioning, kick off their shoes, we create this demand that just happens to sort of be that time and space when those renewables aren't available. So the idea is that long term, as we start and it's not really that long. There is a plan in New York State's climate action plan to start phasing out these peakers. As they start coming off of the grid, the idea behind battery storage is to sort of hold on to the renewables during the day, non-peak hours, charge them up, then they'd be available for the offset of that demand later on. So it's just this component of the renewable energy that allows us to start relying less on fossil fuels and peaker plants.
So how is this battery being going to be fed?
It will be directly connected to the national grid lines that run right through the property. So it will be taking energy from the grid, and it will be putting energy back into the grid. We at this moment in time cannot, direct green electrons, green wind or solar electrons into our system, but ultimately that's the hope that it's a bit greater percentage.
Okay, excuse my ignorance, but what's the shelf life of such a battery?
So we have about a 40-year shelf life on the battery system that we're looking at. At multiple times, they may have to, swap out the individual batteries or, update some of the components, but the actual batteries themselves are good for about.
So the ones that have run their life or components that have to be replaced, how are they disposed?
They are completely recyclable. They are. We've actually kind of looked just recently this week, talked about who those battery recycling places are locally, so we can kind of just keep everything,
Maybe explain too that these are zinc batteries.
I'm sorry?
But these are zinc-based.
They are
batteries,
zinc-based
not
batteries.
lithium.
Correct. Yep. That's the differentiator in the product. Yes.
Are they lead acid?
They're not lead acid. They're zinc.
They're what? Sorry.
Zinc.
What chemistry?
Zinc.
Zinc phosphate?
Not zinc phosphate. There is a good amount of information in the application. It is a zinc electrolyte battery, and they're about the size of a suitcase.
And where do we import all the zinc from in the U.S.? Do you know that?
China. No, I'm sorry.
Where do you import all the zinc?
I don't mean they will, right. I think if there's that much interest, then perhaps we should hold a special hearing or a special meeting where a representative from Blue Lake can come and, speak to the residents. If you have, I don't blame anybody for having concerns. It's a newer industry, but right now, under privilege of the floor, we can't answer all your questions. It's probably kind of unfair to you since you're not sure one question you're going to get hit with. But if that's something that the residents would like, whether we hold it out here or hold it at town hall, but maybe that's something that we should do for public information. And that way the public will be more informed on it, and everybody will have a clear understanding. So, didn't mean to be rude, but
So that's good. Just one final clarification.
What I believe I heard you say that Ms. Scannell's recommendation of following the New York State Code of Model Guidelines, in lieu of anything else in place, your company is agreeable to following that guidance.
And wording mostly been following that
Record.
And honestly, really, above and beyond that, if there's a recommendation from the town engineer, we're providing that information.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Renee Mertens.
Thank you for allowing me this time. My name is Renee Mertens. I live at 2720 Main Lane in Rotterdam. I also wanted to speak to the 5 megawatt battery storage system, the BEST system. As the board is aware, the community may not be. I'm one of the voluntary people on the Energy Solar Committee here in Rotterdam. So I have taken some time to take a look at this. Some of the things I have been saying in our committee meeting from prior experience being in IT is there is an infancy stage. in any new technology. And we are definitely going to be experiencing this. The technology with the zinc is brand new, brand spanking new. I went out and I researched that. You cannot find anything on that type of a system other than the promotion that it's the best thing since sliced bread with no faults. So I really would like to take time to review the application. I would like more time for the committee to take a look at the NYSERDA best code. I do think that we should immediately adopt that, and if we can't do that, we need to call for a moratorium so we can take a closer look at it. Some of the things that I have come aware of with BESS, that there are other types of technologies out there. We don't know if a company's going to come in and maybe the new technology doesn't work well, then they want to change to a different type of technology. We know we have lithium batteries out there, and they definitely are not the safest things in the world. You cannot extinguish those with fire or with water if they catch on fire at all. 10,000 gallons will not put out that type of a fire. We would need green foam, so we would need to have a lot more research on the type of technology they're proposing. We would really want to make sure it's the safest thing for our community, that we're putting them in the right area, that we have the right type of barriers around them, and we have the right type of water infrastructure around it to support if there is a problematic situation that arises. I don't think it's the safest place to put it on top of a gas line area. Definitely not wise. So maybe that is something that we should really look closer at. We don't know what we're bringing in. As it was already said, there's only 10 BESS in the state of New York. We don't want to run into something blind. So I think for the best for our community, we're looking at a lot of things, including water infrastructure right now. We really want to make sure we have things in place that we really need for some of these systems that are coming in. So having said that, I just wanted to put out my concern in regards to BESS. Thank you.
That's it. Okay. Is there anybody in the audience that might not have signed up but would like to speak? Is there anyone on Zoom that would like to speak, Chuck?
No, ma'am.
Okay. One last chance. Anybody here want to speak that didn't sign up? And I'm closing privilege of the floor, and we'll move on to our resolutions for the night. Our first resolution is Resolution 161 of the year 2023. The clerk will read.
To accept town board meeting minutes of April 26, 2023.
Is there any discussion?
I'll make the motion.
Motion by Mr. Christou. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Second by Mr. Dodson. On the question, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Christou?
Yes.
Mrs. Miller Herrera?
Yes.
Mr. Dodson?
Yes.
Mr. Mastriani?
Yes.
And Mrs. Collins?
Yes.
5 yes.
Resolution passes. The next resolution is Resolution 162 of the year 2023. The clerk will read.
To accept revenue for the town clerk's office for April of 2023.
Okay, is there any discussion? Do I have a motion?
I'll make the motion.
Motion by Mr. Dodson. Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
Second by Mr. Christou. On the question, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Christou?
Yes.
Mrs. Miller Herrera?
Yes.
Mr. Dodson?
Yes.
Mr. Mastriani?
Yes.
And Mrs. Collins?
Yes.
5 yes.
Resolution passes. Resolution 163 of the year 2023. The clerk will read.
To approve budget transfers of gas and diesel to the 2023 budget.
Is there any discussion? Do I have a motion?
I'll make the motion.
Motion by Mr. Dodson. Do I have a second?
Second it.
Is that you, John?
Yes.
Second by Mr. Mastriani. On the question, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Christou?
Yes.
Mrs. Miller Herrera?
Yes.
Mr. Dodson?
Yes.
Mr. Mastriani?
Yes.
And Mrs. Collins?
Yes.
5 yes.
Resolution passes. Resolution 164 of the year 2023. The clerk will read.
To amend an agreement with Labella Associates for additional technical engineering services related to the special improvement area for Curry Road sewer improvements.
Is there any discussion? Do I have a motion?
I'll make that motion.
Motion by Mr. Dodson. I'll second. On the question, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Christou?
Yes.
Mrs. Miller Herrera?
Yes.
Mr. Dodson?
Yes.
Mr. Mastriani?
Yes.
And Mrs. Collins?
Yes.
5 yes.
Resolution passes. Resolution 165 of the year 2023. The clerk will read.
Authorize the supervisor to negotiate and execute a memorandum of understanding with Capital District Transportation Committee.
Is there any discussion? I would like to reiterate for anyone who's at home watching that this is funding that we're getting to look at the corridor from where Curry Road and Hamburg Street Circle is, all the way down Gilman Avenue. And hopefully, when the study comes out, we'll be able to have sidewalks and an improved area for all of our residents. Any other discussion?
I'll make a motion.
Motion by Mr. Dodson. Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
Second by Mr. Mastriani. On the question, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Christou?
Yes.
Mrs. Miller Rivera?
Yes.
Mr. Dodson?
Yes.
Mr. Mastriani?
Yes.
And Mrs. Collins?
Yes.
5 yes.
Resolution number 166 of the year 2023, the clerk will read.
To amend the schedule of fees?
Is there any discussion?
I'll make the motion.
Motion by Mr. Dodson. Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
Second by Mr. Mastriani. On the question, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Christou?
Yes.
Mrs. Miller Rivera?
Yes.
Mr. Dodson?
Yes.
Mr. Mastriani?
Yes.
And Mrs. Collins?
Yes.
5 yes.
Resolution passes. Resolution 167 of the year 2023, the clerk will read.
To enter into an agreement with Construction Technology for construction materials inspection and testing services for the salt storage facility.
Is there any discussion? Clerk will, I'm sorry, do I have a motion?
I'll make that motion.
I'll second that motion.
Motion by Mr. Dodson, second by Mr. Christou. On the question, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Christou?
Yes.
Mrs. Miller Rivera?
Yes.
Mr. Dodson?
Yes.
Mr. Mastriani?
Yes.
And Mrs. Collins?
Yes.
5 yes.
Resolution passes. Our next resolution is Resolution 168 of the year 2023. The clerk will read.
To accept and award bid for one grapple truck.
Is there any discussion? Again, I'd like to point out for people who weren't here for the agenda that we did have a grapple truck that was ordered 2 years ago. It's still not in production. We have 2 grapple trucks, both older. One of them is no longer in service at all. And we have one that's kind of limping along. So we put out a bid for a grapple truck, especially with the last snowstorm where we had a lot of broken branches. It's really going to help us to pick up the brush around the town in a timely manner. So is there any other discussion?
I just want to thank Larry again for always using his resources to fill in the gaps by finding this used truck. It's not the first time we've gone out and found something at a bargain because there's nothing else available. Thanks again, Larry.
And it's only 2020 with 18,000 miles.
Right.
I'll make that motion.
2021.
I'll second that motion.
Motion by Mr. Dodson, second by Mr. Christou. On the question, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Christou?
Yes.
Mrs. Miller Rivera?
Yes.
Mr. Dodson?
Yes.
Mr. Mastriani?
I would like to mention too that residents, if you have any yard waste in front of your house or anywhere on the street, your neighbor's house, please call Highway Garage, let them know that it's out there. We're operating with one less grapple truck, so it takes us a little longer to get to it, but we do ask that you call it in. So my vote is yes.
Mrs. Collins?
Yes.
5 yes.
Resolution passes. Our next resolution is Resolution 169 of the year 2023. The clerk will read.
To approve budget transfers to the 2023 budget.
Is there any discussion? Again, this transfer relates to the purchase of the grapple truck.
I'll make that motion.
Motion by Mr. Dodson. Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
Second by Mr. Christou. On the question, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Christou?
Yes.
Mrs. Miller Rivera?
Yes.
Mr. Dodson?
Yes.
Mr. Mastriani?
Yes.
And Mrs. Collins?
Yes.
5 yes.
Resolution passed. Resolution 170 of the year 2023 was tabled during the agenda meeting. So we'll go on to Resolution 171 of the year 2023. The clerk will read.
To accept and award bid for senior center kitchen equipment.
Is there any discussion? Do I have a motion?
Madam Supervisor, I do business with Nino's Equipment and Supply. My company does, so I have to recuse myself from this vote.
Okay, so Mr. Mastriani will be recused from this vote.
I'll make a motion.
Motion.
Just under further discussion, I just want to bring to the board's attention, not that it won't work based on the amount of use the senior center uses, but Arctic Air is a product made in China. Okay, I believe Continental is manufactured in the United States, but just a little tidbit of information. The amount of usage that the senior center is going to use it, they're not running at 18 hours a day full bore, so opening and closing those doors. So it should work fine, but I'll second the motion.
Okay, motion by Mr. Dodson, second by Mr. Christou. On the question, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Christou?
Yes.
Mrs. Miller Rivera?
Yes.
Mr. Dodson?
Yes.
Mr. Mastriani?
He recused himself.
Thank you. Mrs. Collins?
Yes.
4 yes, 1 recused.
Resolution passes. Resolution 172 of the year 2023, the clerk will read.
Authorize remaining payment to Empire Engineering for services rendered in the year 2019.
Any discussion? Do I have a motion?
I'll make the motion.
Motion by Mr. Dodson. Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
Second by Mr. Mastriani. On the question, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Christou?
Yes.
Mrs. Miller Herrera?
Yes.
Mr. Dodson?
Yes.
Mr. Mastriani?
Yes.
And Mrs. Collins?
Yes.
5 yes.
Resolution passes. Resolution number 173 of the year 2023, as amended in our agenda meeting, the clerk will read.
Requesting bids for water and sewer fire hydrants and accessories,
Okay.
as amended.
Any discussion?
I'll make the motion.
Motion by Mr. Christou. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Second by Mr. Dodson. On the question, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Christou?
Yes.
Mrs. Miller Herrera?
Yes.
Mr. Dodson?
Yes.
Mr. Mastriani?
Yes.
And Mrs. Collins?
Yes.
5 yes.
Resolution passes. Resolution 174 of the year 2023, the clerk will read.
Modification to the 2023 budget.
Okay. Any discussion? Okay. Do I have a motion?
I'll make the motion.
Motion by Mr. Dodson. Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
Second by Mr. Mastriani. On the question, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Christou?
Yes.
Mrs. Miller Herrera?
Yes.
Mr. Dodson?
Yes.
Mr. Mastriani?
Yes.
And Mrs. Collins?
Yes.
5 yes.
Resolution passes. Resolution 175 of the year 2023, the clerk will read.
To accept and award Barton & LaJudas PC for professional engineering services for the water system improvement project.
Okay, is there any discussion? Do I have a motion?
I'll make the motion.
Motion by Mr. Dodson. Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
Second by Mr. Mastriani. On the question, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Christou?
Yes.
Mrs. Miller Herrera?
Yes.
Mr. Dodson?
Yes.
Mr. Mastriani?
Yes.
And Mrs. Collins?
Yes.
5 yes.
Resolution passes. And Resolution 176 of the year 2023, the clerk will read.
To authorize the town supervisor to execute a shared services agreement for IT services between Schenectady County and the town of Rotterdam.
Okay, is there any discussion? Do I have a motion?
I'll make the motion.
Motion by Mr. Dodson. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Christou. On the question, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Christou?
Yes.
Mrs. Miller Herrera?
Yes.
Mr. Dodson?
Yes.
Mr. Mastriani?
Yes.
And Mrs. Collins?
Yes.
5 yes.
Resolution passes. That concludes our resolutions for this evening. We'll now have any liaison reports from any of the board members.
Just again, Madam Supervisor, a reminder, the Memorial Day service at Town Hall on Memorial Day Monday at 2 p.m. Okay, and I'm not sure if there's a deadline on this, but the food vendors flyer from last week, I was just going to mention it again, the deadline is not passed yet.
I'm not sure whether it has or not, but they can still
If you know
call
any
it.
food vendors that might be interested, get a hold of Lydia Griffin.
Is there anything else under liaison reports or miscellaneous?
Get announced the parade.
Oh,
Oh, yeah, the parade is, I announced food vendors, I didn't mention the parade. It's Thursday, the 25th of May, starts at Mohannes and ends at Rotterdam Town Hall.
What time, Evan?
5 to 9 p.m.
anything else? I just wanted to bring people up to date on our Department of Public Works for the month of April. 92 permits were issued, and 92 permits were requested. They were all issued. We have 30 complaints. 11 of them are completed. 5 are in progress, and 14 are still pending. Okay. Is there anything else that any of the board members would like to say under miscellaneous?
Madam Supervisor, I'm going to try to address this one last time. And again, I'm not, Mr. Rosie, and I'm not going to...
No, I'm not going to attack.
You asked the question, I'm
no.
trying to answer the question.
No, it's okay.
All right,
I come every 2 weeks to
I
this
have nothing
meeting.
more.
No, this is not what our forefathers fought for. I come here every 2 weeks, and every 2 weeks I get attacked. I get attacked. And somebody in South Carolina saw it and called me and asked what's going on. If you think I'm going to sit here,
There's no attack. You said
Oh,
you
no.
mentioned your name. I was just going to mention that I avoid people's names, not out of disrespect, but just the opposite. Okay? I don't find it necessary to point out names.
when you say
I find it
people,
more respectful to not single people out. That was all I was going to say.
But you did, because you said, people, come up to this podium. People, one person comes up to this podium.
You mentioned your name, you get offended that you're being
No,
attacked.
I complimented him for mentioning my name. But you guys will not let me finish. No, but you can laugh all you want. A couple of residents here talked for more than 5 minutes when you guys went back and forth. But you guys want to shut me down because you can't answer my question, because you can't deal with the damn truth. The public needs to know what's going on. That's what our forefathers formed this government, to have discourse as well as cooperation. But you guys don't want that. But you're going to attack me. You want to bully me like I'm on a playground. Don't.
Mr. Ocean, can I ask you a question?
Go ahead. As long as I don't get interrupted or get snickered at.
What are you hoping to find? What do you suspect nefarious?
I'm not saying, no, you're using that word, he's using that word. I'm just saying, give us an answer. I'm asking who represented us and was there, because you guys all kept saying it's a negotiation. I don't know, when I went to school, negotiation means one side brings something up, the other side brings something up, and you disagree. You don't disagree, you come to the middle. You come to the middle. I am asking, what was our counter offer?
I'll say this. I think that the town of Rotterdam won that negotiation with your help. We did
not win.
We won because we got out of a bad deal.
We gave them, and I know the attorney wants to shut up. We gave them $250,000. How did we win?
Rent.
How did we win? No. How can
settlement 7.5 months that the landlord could not offer its space to everybody else. Basically, we committed to 10 years.
Of a deal.
We committed to 10 years, okay? The board has the resolution, but that doesn't mean that in a legal environment, they couldn't have held us responsible for the entire 10-year lease. So the way I interpret it, and again, I'm going to say this is my interpretation. I'm not an attorney, nor do I want to speak for an attorney or for the town. So for 7.5 months, the landlords could not offer the space to anyone else. Okay? So to get out of a 10-year lease, which would have been worth millions, an offer was made to pay $250,000 in order to cancel the lease, free the town of Rotterdam of liability for the full 10 years and the full amount of that lease, and everybody moves on. Personally, I think that's an excellent deal. Yep. Not every negotiation is an offer and counter offer.
But you didn't negotiate.
That's not true.
Then tell us, what was our counter offer? That's all. 2 questions. 2 questions.
Not every deal. If the deal put in front of you seems reasonable and in good faith and allows you to save the town millions of dollars for a deal that the community clearly, although I was in favor, it clearly felt a different way. You know, it doesn't have to be, not every deal has 7 counter offers back and forth.
I didn't say that.
An offer was made, the people that were involved, I wasn't one of them, the people that were involved in the negotiation felt it was a fair offer. They presented it to the board members, we voted on it, and we got out of the deal. I don't know how to tell.
So there was no counter offer.
Didn't need to.
For 6 months. For 6 months. For 6 months plus. I'm asking. But
it was asked and answered.
No, it wasn't. It was never answered.
I think Mr. Mastrini did.
No, he didn't. No, he did not. No, he did not. Or I wouldn't keep bringing this up. And not only that, you guys are saying we may have been liable millions of dollars in legal fees. How do you know that? How does any of you know that? Because I guarantee you, Viaport doesn't want bad publicity. This has nothing to do with my feelings of Viaport. They don't want bad publicity. They don't want a nightmare of a PR. That's why they got out of there. But we gave them money.
Okay. That concludes our business for tonight. Do I have a
motion to adjourn?
Thank you. Motion by Mr. Tito, second by Mr. Johnson. All in favor? Aye.